All right. So I see a couple of people here, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I wanted to say thank you to both Devin and William for saying yes to the basically there was a sixth installment of the I think I can't speak for everyone here reading series. This is a reading series for writers. So there are people who have written, are writing, or think I should be, or I think should be writing. Though poetry is the way that I sort of vandalize the melancholy of being unasked to exist. This is a writer space, so anything poetry, vignettes, silences, singing, excerpts from novels, stories, anything basically from the part of you that writes down the world is welcome. It's your space. Everyone can duck out, of course, at any time due to life happening, unhappening, and due to their comfort level. Whether reading or not, you can turn your camera off or keep it on, consistent with your comfort level. Please keep the audio off during reading. If you do have something to say about what you're seeing that needs said, you can definitely unmute and say the thing that I need to know or drop it in the chat. Either way. Afterward, if you have any questions, or even during, if you have any questions, comments, you can direct them to bluejawedsnake@gmail.com, or you can just drop them in the chat if it's during. Also, if you need a transcription of the meeting, email me and I'll get that to you as well. I will be able to upload this recording on YouTube, which will be done fairly shortly afterward. Basically, the layout's going to be I'll introduce reader one, they'll read. I'll introduce reader two, they'll read, and once they've read, I'll have a question for each of them, which I didn't tell them about, but hopefully that'll keep it kind of spontaneous. After that, we'll go to the open mic. So with that said, go ahead and introduce our first reader is Devan Murphy. Devan Murphy is the author of I'm Not a Baby from Ethel 2024. Her creative writing and visual art have both appeared in the Iowa Review, Diagram, Pithead Chapel, The Guardian, ANMLY, and elsewhere. Originally from Northeast Ohio, she now resides in Pittsburgh, and you can find her on Instagram at GYTRASHH. I came to Devan's work mostly through Instagram and some mutual friends. And through that, I found an essay she'd written called How to Write About Ohio. Um, there was there was a phrase in that essay that said Ohio, she believes Ohio is low ceilings and an angry man where wanting more attention than he deserves. And I was immediately hooked and immediately bought her work from Ethel and absolutely loved it. What I like about their work is that it has this kind of like rambling ache, I think, that feels like it's been kicked out of its home by hurt. Um, and with that, I will put the spotlight on Dev. And
Thank you so much for that introduction, Barton, and for inviting me to be here. I'm such a fan of your work, and I'm so excited to participate in this. Um, yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and dive into a couple of pieces that I uh, had published in my chapbook that came out earlier this year. As Barton said, I'm not a baby. Um, this first one is like a long, rambly prose essay called "One Cool Rock." I wrote this in like 2021 or 22. I mean, obviously we're still in a pandemic, but this was like around the time when things were starting to like kind of go back to normal again, and just kind of the uncertainty and fear at that time. Old fears, the dark, hell, loneliness, new fears, coughing, the future, the dark, bears, crowds, loneliness. In the new world with the new changes, I am suffering. I'm saying to everyone, did it just get louder in here or is it me? And everyone is saying, it is you. Of course, when we exchange words, we are adding to the noise. It is not just me. Nick is suffering too. He was adopted during the pandemic, you see. 24/7 access to me is his norm, and now that the world is returning to its norm, his little heart is broken. I usually sleep with tiny lights shaped like stars on, but they hurt S's head sometimes, so we shut them off, and I feel so crushed by darkness I believe I will die. I admit, sleeping in the dark is an impossible task when I'm alone. My older sister, who lives out of state, has trouble leaving the house, so I tell her, go to the woods and don't come back until you found one cool rock. Giving advice on how to act less like myself makes me feel less like myself. But I think there are more people who need a mission in order to leave the house than we realize, pandemic or not. My apartment is swathed in beige, so I bought plants and colorful rugs, and now I want to leave the house even less frequently. I get a remote job as a copy editor. I spend the day editing self-help books in my pajamas while Nick sits on my lap. I'm not doing much that is special. I know logically that does not mean I'm not worthy of love. Because I often feel overcome by the weight of my failures, E advises me to construct a comfort list, which is what her therapist advised her to do. So this is my comfort list: star-shaped lights, colorful rugs, nice-looking rocks, the singing mice from Babe, the old man who walked into the mummy wing at the History Museum once and said, "It smells like a church in here." The rest of the day, all I could think of was that man and of the care given to a dummy's plaster foot tucked away under a turning wheel, the flower soft tan line Ving the top of the toes. I read an article recently that said rats love to drive tiny cars. Researchers wanted to see if they could teach the rats to drive. It turns out they not only could, but it took very little motivation. The rats love to drive. It makes them happy. That makes me happy. Later, I read an article that said when scientists study rats, they often only study male rats because female rats are too hormonal. That ruined the rat car story for me a little bit. I suspect in the next few hundred years, animals will be treated entirely equal as humans. I don't think that means we'll stop eating each other. S thinks that my adopting a cat is a sign of maturity, but that I still need to buy a car in order to be caught up in life. Even the rats have little cars, I think. I'm behind even the rats. I love S, but sometimes his work ethic depresses me. I don't think he puts enough stock in luck. I think this hurts him deeply. When I fail, the pain is acute, and I put a lot more stock in luck than he does. S calls the shelf where I put all my tiny objects my curiosity cabinet. My curiosity cabinet is an old hardwood office mailbox, 3 tiny mailboxes by 17 tiny boxes. I found it on the side of the road shortly after the pandemic began, and S lugged it into my apartment for me. I've stored many things in it, such as rocks, dried clementine peels, pencils, dried flowers, a matchbox car, a lump of coal, corks, unused sparklers, a token for a free game of mini golf, feathers, seashells. At the top of the shelf is a little sign that says library. People are always giving me small things to put into the curiosity cabinet, and this is one way I know that I'm a part of the world, even if I do not feel it sometimes. A compact antique autograph book from J, a snail shell from S, like the giant pink snail shell in Dr. Dolittle, he said. I've stuffed feathers into the shell, and now it looks like a bird has made it into a home. A tiny tin from C with the words, "Esteem the giver," curled up on the top. A rabbit figurine that belonged to E's mother. What do I do to support my friends? Not enough, I worry. My confession is this: the world is reopening. I'm safe, I'm well, and I'm still afraid. I'm afraid of the government and of money and of coughing. I'm afraid of standing up for things. I'm afraid of what it means that half the country showed themselves to be comfortably indifferent to their compatriots throughout this last few years. And this is a small fear. You'll say my priorities are out of order. I'm afraid that I'll only continue to feel safe at home and that I'll be swept under the rug and forgotten as everyone else moves on with their lives or doesn't. Other items on my comfort list: I Spy books, Jasmine tea, The Swallow and Thumbelina, how he smiled for her when she got engaged to the fairy prince, even though he'd be so lonely without her. Hans Christian Andersen's stories are full of good-hearted losers. I think this is what I like best about them. I read that Anderson was so afraid of dying, he would attach a note to his shirt when he slept that said, "Not dead, only sleeping." Someone online took a poll. What animals are introverts? I thought instantly of several different animals: spider, mole, mouse, centipede, and then thought further about the different ways there are of being alone. Spiders, I think, are content to be alone. They wish to be by themselves, confident loners. Mice and centipedes are simply too anxious to be extroverts, and moles are so full of resentment and disdain towards the world above ground that they would seek to shame those who rightfully belong there into remaining secluded with them. There's a certain type of loneliness that is so lonely it wishes to make others lonely too. Sometimes I worry I have that loneliness. My bigger confession is that I only felt safe at home before the pandemic even started. I find somebody I love or admire and I want to contain them in my palms always. My palms, thankfully, are not big enough. My biggest confession of all is that I never feel truly safe or at rest, even when I am home alone. In fact, sometimes when I'm alone in my house, I begin to worry that I'm the only person who exists at all. I've never been much of a meat eater, but when I adopted Nick, I felt an even stronger conviction than before that maybe I ought to stop eating animals, even though that's really all he eats. One day he dropped a dead mouse in the hallway in front of my bedroom door. He looked at me so proudly. After taking a second to process the shock of a tiny dead body in my home, I scooped Nick up in my arms and deposited him in my bedroom and shut the door on him and fetched a plastic bag and tongs. I came back to the mouse and stared at it. It looked perfect, like it was only sleeping. I wondered if it had not died, if I could have taught it to drive a tiny car or a tiny motorcycle like in The Mouse and the Motorcycle. I wondered how Nick had killed it, battered it to death, crushed its little bones, I supposed. Wary, I poked at it with the tongs, but it didn't move. Its skin only gave in a little, like a pillow for a doll, or a baked potato cooked too long, or a little balloon that has begun to lose air. Taut but malleable, flexible. I plucked the tiny corpse with the tongs and deposited it into the grocery bag and threw it into the garbage outside. When I released Nick from the bedroom, he circled in confusion the spot where the mouse had lain, looking around for his present to me, and I felt a small tug of mourning. And the mourning was not for the dead mouse, but for ignorant, murderous Nick, whose Valentine was met with a look of horror. I have trouble sitting in one spot while I talk on the phone. I wander about the apartment or go for walks. The other night, I returned library books while talking to E on the phone, and I saw a young deer sitting on the lawn by the library steps, eating some flowers in the dark, completely content. It was such a special sight, but since the day I discovered the dead mouse, I found myself on multiple occasions talking on the phone and distractedly lying down on the carpet in the spot where the mouse once rested. I rise quickly mid-conversation upon realizing, and then days later I do it again. I don't know what draws me there. I'd rather be drawn to a spot of matted grass on the library lawn by the flowers and the book drop. During the pandemic, the place I wanted most to be was in the poetry section of the Carnegie Library by the window where you could look down into the dinosaur wing of the History Museum. But though the library has been open now for a month or so, I've only been there once and I barely spent time by that window. I suspect what I actually missed during quarantine was one moment of sitting by the window, drinking coffee and reading Salamoon. It wasn't the window at all, or maybe it wasn't even that moment of reading poems on a day that happened to be unrepeatably perfect. Maybe it was just the belief that people could be good and kind and safe with one another, which has died or looks like it has. I think now I'm going to read a couple of short pieces from the same chapbook. This one is called The Goose, a Diptych. I dreamed of a canoe and of the two of us. I was new on the lake, streaming through the murk, the cellar scent of blue and brown water, and you, my new love, saying nothing, only rowing us backwards deftly. At the lake's deepest point, a miniature goose, a full-grown adult, though not 5 inches high, resting on an island of ice, mid-June. Tenderly, I scooped it. Its feet were frozen in a lump of ice, but it stood on my palm as quiet and unmoving as you, who waited with paused oars, seeming not to care much about the goose, but caring about my care. I rubbed my fingers over the ruly bird's webs to warm them, and the ice melted, all shiny and dewy, as the goose stared into the distance, patiently or bluely, I could not tell. The goose free, we moved on. Tuesday night, I felt a stabbing at the bottom of my foot. Ignoring it, I woke in the morning to the same pain and could not run. You sat with me in the dining room and took my foot in your palm and tried to maneuver the splinter out, spaded with tweezers, the dip in the soft spot of the sole, right beneath the ball, asking, "Does this hurt?" I wanted to answer yes, and I love you, but I could not tell you I loved you while you held in your hand something so rude as my dirty and wounded foot. You could not remove the splinter, but with time it came loose on its own, or else the soft cheek of my soul grew hard enough to enclose the shard. I think I'll read one more little piece from this chapbook as well, and then maybe a short piece if I have time, something else that I have been working on. This piece is called The Horde. My therapist says most artists are neurotic, and I say, I don't want to be neurotic. And he says, the other end of the spectrum is a rock. Would you rather be a rock? You call me a flying squirrel. I say you are a lion, a bull. Bart wrote, I am the lover. I am the one who waits. But what good does this do for the beloved? The beloved who must mow the lawn and paint a picture of a cow and who wants you to get on with your life. Lewis wrote, be a circle, touch me again. But what good does this do for the sphere? Who is a sphere? I have not painted in weeks. I bring my shivering hands to the blank canvas, prop it up and then withdraw, prop it up and then withdraw. Solomon wrote, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. And when it does not desire, I stand watch over it. I put an Afghan over it while it sleeps to keep it warm. I do not leave the room. You call me to a world in which not waiting is a form of waiting. To be the rock and the circle at the same time. This is what it means to be a sphere. Lewis also wrote, do not love anything, not even an animal, and your heart will never be broken. I would rather be a rock, irredeemable, casketed, and waiting on no one. But I am desirous all the time of you, all the time desirous to the point of waiting all day for you while you're painting and mowing and making your dinner. My basil is wilting and my inbox is full, and when you come to me with seeds and soup and paper and invitations, I am a soundless edge. You are here, and in your presence still I wait, with nothing to show for myself, my love, with nothing to show for my love but my loving. Prop it up and then withdraw. I do not know if you are in love with me, but if you are in love with a dead squirrel. Straight-faced and with tender paws, I lay your gifts in a shoebox under my bed. There they calcify, they colden. So I think I'll change gears a little bit. I've been writing a lot of short fairy tales and like surreal kind of folk tales in the last few months, kind of getting away from like nonfiction. So I might read one or two of those as well. This is part of like a book of illustrated short stories that I'm working on right now. This one is called Goat Boy. The little goat boy with his goat face and white arms is spraying me with water, his hoof knuckles, furry fingers, a butt, a green plastic trigger. I'm spraying him back, the little woman with knuckles, and hairless fingers upon a purple trigger. We are mooing and braying with laughter, moving in slow-mo, such fun. His little jeans, his striped t-shirt over his drum-like child's tummy, and then a vision comes to me mid-shot, a future elucidated by rain. Little goat boy, a little older, with his face in bandages. He's tried to cut off his face. He's grown older now and tried to remove it. He stares at us through a slit in the gauze. You're only hearing about this now, but I've had time to dwell on it, and I'm beyond anguish. I'm now at impatience. What does he think will happen next? Does he think it'll solve his problems? Does he believe he'll fit in with all of us at last with our faces not missing? He'll only be faceless boy then. But right now he's still young and he is chasing me through purifying dew, and I cherish him while he lets me. I think I'll read one more short piece. And it's thank you. And it's less depressing. So better note to go out on, I think. This one is called The Tongue. I've finally hooked a fish, but she begs to be set free or kissed. Swinging back and forth on the line, she says, I'm a witch. I slit the tongue of this fish and ate it. Then I shrank and took the tongue's place. Now I speak for the fish. They hid behind these lips for weeks to escape my enemies, but when I wanted to get free again, I discovered I couldn't reverse the magic without a kiss from a beautiful woman. Kiss me, or at least set me free so I can swim away. How do I know you're telling the truth? I say. Look in my mouth and see, she says. I look inside the fish's mouth, and sure enough, there's a tiny woman glued to the spot where the tongue should be. I can't tell if she's pretty or ugly, but I give the fish a peck on the cheek. No, she says, kiss the lips and use your tongue. I don't want to. Then I'll be a fish forever, she says forlornly. I sigh and remove the hook from the fish's lip and pucker up. I kiss the fish on the lips and slip my tongue inside the fish's mouth and lick the little woman. I feel her tiny tongue lick me back. The sensation is oddly pleasurable, and I kiss the fish for a long time. I begin to think I may be in love, maybe with the fish, or with the witch, or with kissing. The hour passes. The sky becomes orange. I begin to realize no magic is happening. The witch is still a tongue. She has not grown. At last, I draw back from the fish and say, why has nothing happened? Wait, just wait, the fish says. We both wait for several long minutes. The fish stares at me. Its eyes are very human. I wonder if they were that way before the witch took control of the tongue. The sun has died. At last, the fish says, well, I guess you're not a beautiful woman after all. She jumps in the water and swims off into the darkness. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Devin. That was amazing. Thanks for sharing those poems with us. I think it's interesting how whether COVID in isolation or in an open space, how loneliness kind of um shrinks things to make them digestible. And I think you kind of spoke to that. And in the beginning there, you had the one phrase like, don't come back until you find. And I feel that that's what um I think that's a lot of what poetry does. It asks us to search and to return something. So yeah, thank you for reading. That was great. And whoops. And with that, we're gonna move on to our second reader, William Erickson. William Erickson is the author of the collection "You Don't Have to Believe in the World" from April Gloaming. Uh, it's neither correction nor especially true. He is watching a hummingbird. He is watching a hummingbird die. He is watching it fly away. William lives with his partner and two dogs at the bottom of Washington State. I came to William's work via Instagram and also through, I think, recommendation from Tom Snarsky or Benjamin Nice-Paggiani, probably both, honestly. Um, I had his collection Sandbox, which I thought was amazing, and then You Don't Have to Believe in the World from April Gloaming, which I wrote a little reflection on. But yeah, it's basically how I came to his work. His work reminds me of like when you're trying to be still or pretend to be still, and you have so many windows open, on your PC that you're afraid to close because you're afraid the information might change, and that's kind of the feeling his work gives me is that you don't want to really take your eyes off it because you're afraid that it might uh, change when you come back to it. You want to keep it the way it is. And with that, I'll give William the spotlight and mute myself.
Thank you, Barton. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. And Devin, thank you for sharing. That was really lovely. I'm reading outside, obviously, so the analog world might leak in a little bit, but that'll just be texture. Um, so I'm going to read just kind of a small handful of poems from this book. You don't have to believe in the world. And I'm going to read them backwards because that's how I picked them this morning, and it felt pretty right. Um, and then I'll kind of move on to some newer, less project-based um, kind of stuff that feels fun. How the Earth is. Down on the beach, there's a rock face where everyone I love goes to climb. Wind makes a bend in the trees on its nose. Sand piles up like the dead. It is this part of the world that's quit looking. I stand at the top night after night for hundreds and hundreds of years. I study the sky as it goes. It goes is a nice way to say that it's leaving. It was a hard, hard day. After a very hard day at our jobs, we stood in the kitchen deciding, but neither of us could. We made some very good money, I said, and some very good friends. But all we really made were saddles for miniature horses that children would ride on their birthdays. They'd ride into papery sunsets, painted fantastically by the local eccentric. They'd ride wearing spurs, how they dug in the hide, and then we made love like the love that we make is our last leg to stand on. Inventions. I invent how slowly a boat at sea sinks. I make money selling chances of escape, but the chances flood the deck, fill up the hole. The boat sets sail with no one on board, sets sail like it were the last way out in a long, long line of ways out. Picking apples. There's a really great orchard in Poughkeepsie where hearts grow. We walk the rows, hand in hand, small talking below the beating that bobs the branch tips. They drip when it rains, go silver at night, grow silent. We walk row by row for many, many years until one day a murder of crows does what murders of crows do. Black feathers, a whole sky. This is not the life I'd imagined, I tell you. This slender line in a waste, this shadowy red sea, this soft, heavy rain that slips down and in and hurts sometimes and stops sometimes. Alice, are you hearing me? Dad's bouquet. No one appreciates the moon anymore. How it says your name at night right before you fall asleep. How it gives mother flowers at father's funeral. No one these days takes time to plunge their face in the pond. So that's that from the book. I'm just going to jump right into these longer, kind of a longer run of poems. I'm not going to differentiate too much in between these because they're all in a big long document sitting on my phone. Portrait of a swimmer. I drew the wrong picture. I did. Bent mountain, big earth with a neck. Your jewelry tethers dark ponds of birds. Portrait of a picnic. This one has an epigraph by a very good friend of mine who I think might be on the Zoom vicariously. Um, And it says, on what would have been at least a neutral day, the air was charged and it changed me. D.C. Klein. Drawers can see, cupboards speak. These long sentences your grace extends from the library room with stringy rain on its chin. Where it falls, black moss explodes. Night explodes. Has anyone ever seen the night near Dutchman's Creek? There, the dark pickets jut into trees. I asked my love, may I have that small flame from the jar? A chain of red ants, reciprocal until not. I laced my shoes past the ankle. Please climb uninterruptedly into the slick puzzle of lumped skies our loves enjoy. Venus. I tried to bathe at 7 a.m. The evening that slow smear found a buckle independent of earth. We all swell with termites over these wrinkling plates. Small white chickadee, your white is off-white. Sequence of lights. For days, I guess, the orange begonias. Seeds in the fire, big loop of sun. My skin is solar powered. One slim habit, the sky, the sky. The maple yellow in my sleep, drawing blanks like the white lobes of my fingers. Deep in the pond, everything hinges, even spines. As kids, my dad took us up Devil's Back. There, the humble gravel scurried, delicately bombed the trees. On a slump where animals grew bored with leaves, how many mistakes depend on these circles of intimacy? Today, I think the sun is a brake light, some soup of silent letters. What words are all H's? What meager cars cram animals by dozens? I've got a spare dream where the cloud splits into multiples of some rhododendron down a straight, unending road that ends to the sea or the seeing. It is a dead ringer for thirst. This will be the last poem. This is a little sonnet from a series of sonnets I've been sort of assembling from junk lines over the past couple months. And then I'll hand it back to Barton. And thanks for listening. This has been great. Pretty warm outside, so like I'm nervous and warm and probably too sweaty. Body parts. Out of my own feet stretch ribbons of sun. This weather wants something to eat, a white lump of sea or a bird's nest. Fluffed seats beam high up. Timothy of the cedar grove, your boots are trunks of memory. I regret ever actualizing my margins. The medicine is a forever trailing off but never ending. I only ask for the small compartment of love, that unnoticeable jab at humanity the sky floats on. I dip my toe into my moral fluctuations and a wrist leaks out, a sound in the air like a dart through the eye of the facts. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, William. That was amazing and beautiful. I love the I don't know, like the you know, the tilt towards or the nod towards these things we invent. I think sometimes as writers, these inventions, and we're always inventing things that have already been that already exist or are created, you know, creating place for that. And I think your writing does that. So just thank you for sharing those poems with us. So with that, I have it's not really a question. I don't know. I always try to do these questions for each writer, and a lot of times I can't shoehorn the questions or what brought about the questions. I have a hard time shoehorning them into a simple question. But I kind of started this one for both of our readers today. I think both of you, uh, whether directly or avoidantly, just not a word, but write about place in a sense. And I wonder if, especially in these recent times where there seems to be this obliteration of place, right? with Palestine, with the uncovering of the veil of empire, and how empire kind of renders place irrelevant. I just had a question, or maybe just asking for a few words on how each of you um, keep place alive in your work, or write towards place. And you can basically just say anything you want. You don't have to even like address the question or whatever. But I just want to throw that out there, and then to ask you maybe for a couple words on what place might mean to you, or how you redirect place in your writing. So yeah, we'll start with a Devon, and I'll go ahead and give them the spotlight.
Yeah. Think about that. Because yeah, place is definitely really important to my writing, and I mean to me. Um, yeah, but I think a lot of it comes down to like you're often not writing about a place. You're often, or I'm often writing about what that place means, or what you associate with that place. So like the idea of like even like the idea of home, and I'm thinking of like, I mean, you mentioned Palestine, and earlier this is not at all the same thing, but you mentioned like the essay that I had written about Ohio. And I guess just in that essay, just kind of what I was doing is just I don't live there anymore, and I don't want to live there anymore. But that idea of like this was something, this was home, but what does that actually mean when you can't go back, or can't, or don't want to go back, or when your home has been destroyed, or something like that. And it's but yeah, I think for me a lot of it comes down to like you're writing about home, but in that indirect way, or writing about place in that indirect way, where it's more about what it means to you and what the feelings are than the actual literal place. If that makes sense.
Thanks. Yeah,
Um,
sorry to put everybody on the spot there, but thanks, Devin. Totally, that was a great answer, and I totally agree about the you're always writing towards, it's the avoidance or the sudden thing or whatever. You're always kind of writing around or towards that. But yeah, I'll go ahead and give it to William now. Um, and that's it.
um, yeah, I think I've been thinking about place, and kind of what the remembered place actually even is. And I think the way that I um, think about or approach place in my own writing is as a way to um, bring a kind of self into the writing and onto the page. And so I tend to think of place as kind of an embodiment. Um, and in the context of empire, I think we see this pretty obviously and devastatingly all over social media right now. Like, you can take the place away from people, but it's much more difficult to take the place out of people. And so I think of like the poets and writers who are sharing just the most atrocious shit that you've seen, and some of them aren't living in Gaza at the moment, but they're embodying all of Gaza. um it just kind it makes me think of place as a form of self, I think. And that's what I sort of try to bring into my writing, maybe more lately as I'm thinking about it. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you, William. Yeah, I completely agree. Like I think it's interesting that I'm from a small town in Ohio. Grew up in a conservative household. No reason for me to know anything else about the world beyond uh, what place gave me. And what's interesting to me is like when you were talking about the everything you see on like online and this and that, like you know, I definitely would have been aware of what's going on because of the things I follow and this and that. But um, the connection of place through social media, I I was suddenly seeing friends, like actual people that whose work I wrote about or this or that, talking about, the 300 family members they lost. Like, and there's no disinformation there. These are people that are just writing the devastation as they see it. And these are people I know that have lost real things beyond whatever. So yeah, I think it's interesting how my my desire to write about place and say talk about Ohio and say all these things gave me access to places that are going to exist forever in whatever online afterlife and archive that there is, and that wouldn't have been available to me had that not occurred. Had that dedication to place, whether real or imagined, it hadn't been an obsession that I gave some credence to. So I might have gone a little far there, but thank you both for entertaining my inquiry, for answering so honestly, and for the beautiful reading that you both gave. Um, with that, actually didn't couple of people that I had for the open mic, I don't see are here. So if anybody wants to participate in open mic, just throw it in the chat and I'll give you the spotlight. If not, I have I have a poem from someone here to read, but yeah, I'll give it like 10 seconds. All right, hey, we got Benjamin Naspajani. I'm gonna give him the spotlight here if I can, or I'll remove the spotlight from myself. Wait.
Hey,
Oh,
everybody.
oh,
I'm also sweaty like Will, so I apologize. I just got done running. I have a quick little work in progress that is actually kind of a fairy tale as well, so kind of maybe in conversation with Dev's writing as well. Let me pull it up. Double-faced wooden masks scare away the ancients. Half sheep and half horse, half beast and half storm. Eyes like buttons, teeth like trees. Upon every door is where they sing. Upon every stump they scream. The ringing lasts throughout the night, with the tiniest birds keeping quiet, dying to hear the next note. Sticks of ribbon and staffs of scraps, they stab anything nearing the evil of night. To fight is not their intention, for shivering men rest beneath these dreams. They simply want to stare into the eyes of live monsters, and watch as they crawl back to hell. Thank you.
well, thanks, Ben. You always your imagery is always amazing, and it always comes off so effortlessly, which is not like a backhand compliment. People say effortlessly often, but I just mean that you're definitely in conversation with work that's out there and work that's been done. You're constantly sharing it and replacing yourself with others. So I just want to say I appreciate the fact that you still like dedicate yourself to image and dedicate yourself to what your own work is doing uh beyond that.
Thank you.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
and Dev's pieces about Goat Boy and Witch and the tongue, I was like, this is right up my wheelhouse. So yeah, very inspiring reading. And loved
Yep.
Will's reading as well. Excited to read together on Thursday.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I love about all of this. It doesn't matter maybe as a hash mark in the swallowed star or whatever, but it's definitely something that wouldn't occur, right? It's like an infection or something. Like someone says something, then you want to say something, and then it goes forward. And I hope that we can gather people constantly, not just here, but in other places as well that do that. Um, and again, I might have gone a little farther, but if anybody else wants to do the open mic, just throw it in the chat. If not, I'll read one last thing, and then we'll let everybody get out of here. I know it's a Sunday, end of everyone's weekend. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read a poem, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. I did look up this individual's name on YouTube and a bunch of other things, and I had no guidance. So it's I think it's Banga Adioba, from the collection Exodus, and the poem is called Gunfire, with a postscript, Aleppo, Syria, and poem goes as such: A witness of ash is what you offer when I ask if this is your home. You point to frames and windowsills widened by grief. It was dusk when we docked at the quay, darker when you made for the waters, fleeing gunfire. We walk now past the house and what called out to you, a fold of post-war kids darting, chasing moths on the balustrades, shuffling your feet through the dust, twigs, and withering leaves from your past. You fetch tinders for a different fire. All right. With that, I'll let everyone get out of here. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. We've got quite a few more of these this month, and I'll be posting about those. Probably in about an hour or so, this reading will be available on YouTube, if you want to share it. So thanks again, everybody, and I'll go ahead and end the entire